welcome to our podcast. Today, we're going to talk about the latest Troika meeting that took place in Thailand on December 20, 2024. As you might know, these meetings are usually pretty informal, so not much is known about what was discussed behind closed doors. But based on some reports from news outlets, it seems like Myanmar crisis, including election plans, were a topic of conversation. Now, we don't have all the details, but it's possible that this meeting could be an important step towards promoting peace and stability in the region. We're taking a speculative look at what might happen next, and we'd love for you to join us. Keep an eye out for updates on how things play out. Stay tuned and stay safe.
Okay, so we've been really diving deep into the future of ASEAN lately, and there's a lot going on, especially with that Troika meeting happening in Thailand. Coming up on December 20th,
Right.
So for anyone who needs a quick reminder, the Troika meeting, that's where the current, past, and future ASEAN chairs get together to, strategize.
Exactly.
This time, that's Laos, Indonesia, and Malaysia. It's a pretty big deal. They basically use this meeting to hammer out their game plan, for the whole next year.
Yeah. It's a chance for them to set the agenda, really.
Exactly. So in this deep dive, we're going to focus on what's happening with this Troika meeting,
Okay.
especially from Indonesia's perspective, which I think will be particularly interesting this year.
Yeah, definitely.
And then we'll kind of zoom out a bit and look at, some of the bigger hopes and hurdles that ASEAN is facing overall.
Sounds good.
Now, we can't talk about ASEAN without talking about, the elephant in the room, the Myanmar crisis. It's been a real thorn in the organization's side for a while now, hasn't it?
It really has. ASEAN is, really committed to finding a peaceful, inclusive resolution to the situation. But the Myanmar junta, they're not exactly cooperating with that 5-point consensus peace plan.
Yeah, which is, supposed to be the roadmap to de-escalate the situation.
Right, exactly. Dialogue, humanitarian aid, a ceasefire, all of that.
Right.
But the junta so far hasn't really shown much interest in actually implementing any of it.
And then to complicate things even further, you've got Thailand hosting these informal consultations on Myanmar, and those include neighboring countries and, kind of controversially, the junta itself.
Yeah.
So it's a very delicate situation.
Yeah, it really is a bit of a tightrope walk.
Yeah.
And then you have these consultations. They've been causing quite a bit of debate, especially about Indonesia's involvement.
Oh, how so?
Well, Indonesia, they're sending representatives, but the foreign minister himself isn't going.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and that sparked all sorts of discussions. Some people see it as a way of, being cautious, not wanting to legitimize the junta by sending such a high-level official.
Right, right.
But then others, they think it's a missed opportunity to engage directly.
So what's the general feeling in Indonesia about this?
Well, it's definitely a hot topic. You got the Jakarta Post. They ran an editorial that was pretty strongly worded, saying that Indonesia shouldn't tolerate the junta's brutality, that it would betray ASEAN's core principles.
Wow, strong words.
Yeah.
And then there's that other development that's been making headlines. Malaysia's new prime minister, Anwar Ibrahim, he appointed former Thai PM Thaksin Shinawatra as an advisor on ASEAN. That's a pretty unusual move.
Yeah, it is. I mean, Thaksin, he's a controversial figure, to say the least.
He was ousted in a coup himself, wasn't he?
That's right. But he does have these connections within Myanmar.
So do you think this appointment could actually help move things forward with the Myanmar issue?
Well, some people speculate that this could be Anwar Ibrahim's way of trying to find some back channels to the junta. But, I mean, it's still really early to tell what impact, if any, this will actually have.
Okay, so lots of political intrigue going on there. But let's switch gears for a minute and talk about ASEAN's economic potential. I mean, the numbers they're pretty impressive.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, trade between ASEAN and East Asia, we're talking over $1.5 trillion annually.
Wow. That's more than the GDP of a lot of countries.
It is. It really highlights their economic clout.
And China is their biggest trading partner, right?
Yeah, followed by Japan and South Korea.
So they're really at the heart of this massive economic engine in Asia. But of course, we can't ignore, the other elephant in the room. The South China Sea dispute.
Yeah, definitely.
It's this constant source of tension in the region.
Mm-hmm. A lot of overlapping territorial claims.
And China's actions, they've really raised concerns among some ASEAN members.
Absolutely. And it's not just about territory. It's about control of vital shipping lanes and resources.
And this is where Indonesia's recent actions have, well, let's just say they've raised some eyebrows. You know, that joint statement they signed with China, the one that mentions overlapping claims in the South China Sea.
Right.
It's caused a bit of anxiety among some of the other ASEAN members.
Yeah, I can see why.
Especially since, you know, Indonesia, they don't even officially claim any territory in the South China Sea.
It's a tricky situation.
It is. Some analysts are worried that this might be a sign that Indonesia is, you know, siding with China, jeopardizing its neutral stance.
Yeah, there's definitely a concern that they might be shifting away from that carefully balanced position they've maintained for so long.
So it's a tough balancing act for Indonesia. They want to keep those strong economic ties with China, especially since China is a major investor. But they also don't want to alienate their ASEAN partners who, you know, are wary of China's growing influence.
It's a delicate dance for sure, and it really highlights, again, that bigger challenge of internal coordination within ASEAN. You know, the organization, it strives for unity, but when you have these differing national interests, particularly on something as sensitive as the South China Sea, it makes it really difficult for them to present that truly united front.
It's like the classic ASEAN dilemma. So much potential as this collective force.
Yeah.
But navigating those internal differences, that's always the hurdle.
Exactly. And this internal dynamic, it plays into another ambition of ASEAN's, securing a membership in the G20.
Oh, right. They've been making some noise about that.
Yeah, they have. And with the African Union recently gaining membership, it's kind of fueled their hopes. The argument is that, look, ASEAN, they have the economic muscle, they've got this growing digital economy, they control these vital trade routes, they've got a lot of experience in diplomacy. They could be a really valuable member.
I mean, that all makes sense on paper, but again, it comes back to that internal coordination issue, doesn't it?
It does.
Can they actually present a unified front on global issues if they were to join the G20?
That's the million-dollar question. Some people think that, you know, actually striving for this G20 membership could be the thing that pushes them towards greater cohesion, you know, like they'd be forced to work together more effectively.
So almost like a forcing mechanism.
Yeah, exactly. But, you know, they're more skeptical. They point to ASEAN's history of struggling to find a consensus on really major issues.
So it's a double-edged sword in a way. The desire for greater global influence could be the push they need to, you know, get their act together.
Yeah.
But it could also backfire and expose their weaknesses, those internal fractures, if they're not careful.
Exactly. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out, particularly in the context of this Troika meeting. Like, will Indonesia, as the outgoing chair, push for this more unified approach to global issues to make a case for that G20 bid?
Right.
And then how will Malaysia, the incoming chair, navigate all of this?
Yeah, lots of questions.
It's going to be fascinating to watch for sure.
It seems like there's a lot at stake for ASEAN right now.
Right.
We've talked about Myanmar, the South China Sea, the G20 aspirations. And these are just the tip of the iceberg, really.
Definitely. We've only just scratched the surface of how complex, you know, and how much potential this region has.
Well, before we go any further, I think we need to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll explore how these, you know, regional dynamics play into ASEAN's, well, their hopes and expectations for the future.
Okay, sounds good.
Welcome back. So before the break, we were talking about some of the big, you know, challenges that ASEAN's facing. We've got the Myanmar crisis, we've got the South China Sea dispute, and all of this, it's really, you know, is front and center as that Troika meeting wraps up in Thailand.
And it's not just about those external challenges, right? I mean, ASEAN also has these internal hurdles that could really affect how well they can deal with a world that's changing so fast.
You're right. We can't forget about those internal dynamics.
Yeah.
So speaking of the Troika meeting, what do we actually know about how they tackled these issues? Did Indonesia, as the outgoing chair, were they able to make any progress?
Well, you know, the detailed stuff that they talk about in those Troika meetings, that's usually kept pretty hush-hush.
Yeah.
But we can get some clues from, you know, what they say publicly, what the experts are saying.
Right.
And on that Myanmar issue, it seems like Indonesia, they've continued to really push for that 5-point consensus. They're urging the junta to come to the table, you know, to start a real dialogue, to allow humanitarian access, all of that. But honestly, you know, in terms of concrete progress, it's still really hard to see any real movement.
Yeah. I mean, it's a tough situation. And with Thailand hosting those informal consultations, the ones that involve the junta, it kind of feels like ASEAN is, I don't know, still trying to figure out how to approach this whole crisis effectively.
Absolutely. It's a real balancing act for them. They want to uphold those ASEAN principles, non-interference, human rights, all of that. But they also want to find a way to actually solve this thing.
Right.
A pragmatic solution, something that doesn't just end up isolating Myanmar completely.
And what about the South China Sea? Did they talk about those concerns that were raised about Indonesia's joint statement with China at the Troika meeting?
We don't have the specifics, but I think it's safe to say it probably came up.
Yeah.
Especially with those, anxieties from other countries who have claims there, like Malaysia, Vietnam.
Right.
So it's likely that Indonesia probably said, hey, look, we're still committed to ASEAN unity and we want a peaceful solution to this. But they also probably emphasized that they need to maintain those strong economic ties with China.
Okay, so sounds like Indonesia's trying to, juggle a lot of balls in the air here.
They are.
But beyond managing these immediate crises, what kind of vision did Indonesia, as the chair, put forward for ASEAN's future?
Well, Indonesia has been pretty clear that they want ASEAN to be, a bigger player on the world stage.
Yeah.
They see ASEAN as potentially being like a leading voice in the whole Indo-Pacific region and even beyond that.
Okay. That's ambitious. But, I mean, with all those internal coordination issues that we talked about earlier, can they actually pull that off?
That's the big question. I mean, Indonesia has definitely been trying to push for more unity internally during their time as chair. They've been saying, look, we need to speak with one voice, on these big issues. And their push to join the G20, that's a perfect example of that.
Yeah, that G20, that's a pretty exclusive club.
Yeah.
What makes them think that they have a realistic shot at getting in?
Well, I mean, their arguments, they're not bad. Like ASEAN's economic power, when you combine all the countries, it's pretty significant. And like we talked about, that trade between ASEAN and East Asia, it's booming. Plus, they've got this experience dealing with all this complicated regional dynamics.
Yeah.
And they've played this key role in promoting peace and stability in Southeast Asia, I mean, for decades.
Okay. Yeah, I see their point. But still, it all comes back to that question of whether they can, get over those internal differences and present this unified front, on the global stage.
It does, and it's something that Indonesia has been really, really aware of. They've made some progress in getting everyone more coordinated, especially on economic issues. But will that actually translate into like a more cohesive ASEAN, a more influential ASEAN on the world stage? I mean, it's still to be seen.
So it sounds like they're making a real effort, but it's a steep climb.
Oh, it is. And it's not just about that internal unity. ASEAN also needs to deal with those other big challenges facing the region, like climate change, and the uneven development between countries.
You're right. Those are huge issues that can't be ignored. And we touched on them briefly before, but they really deserve more attention.
Absolutely. And that's what we're going to look at next. We'll dive deeper into how climate change is affecting Southeast Asia and what ASEAN is actually doing about it.
Okay, so we're back and ready to dive into some of those issues facing ASEAN that maybe don't always make the headlines, but are still super important. Before the break, we were talking about Indonesia's vision. Right? Indonesia wanting ASEAN to have more influence on the world stage. But we also know that there are some serious challenges closer to home, like climate change. And that has a really big impact on Southeast Asia, right?
It does. And, climate change for ASEAN, it's not just this future threat. It's happening right now.
Right.
I mean, the region is so vulnerable to the effects of climate change. Rising sea levels, you've got these extreme weather events, typhoons, floods, the whole works. And some ASEAN nations, I mean, they're actually ranked among the most vulnerable in the entire world.
Wow. That's a sobering thought. It really drives home the point that this isn't just some, abstract problem.
Yeah.
It's having these real consequences for people right now, for their lives, for their livelihoods.
Absolutely. And it's not just about adapting to these impacts either, right? It's also about ASEAN being part of the solution, being part of those global efforts. They have a role to play in advocating for stronger climate action, in pushing for things like climate finance.
Right, to help those vulnerable countries actually deal with the costs of of adapting and, and trying to mitigate these effects.
Exactly.
But as we've been discussing, ASEAN has this internal, disparity, right? Some members, they're highly developed, they have more resources, they can deal with climate change better. But then you've got others who are still, grappling with poverty.
Yeah.
And they don't have that same capacity to respond.
Yeah.
I mean, that must make it really tricky to try and come up with some kind of unified approach.
Oh, absolutely. It adds this whole other layer of complexity to the whole climate change issue. And it really underscores, the need for more cooperation, more support between those member states to make sure that everyone can be part of the solution, that everyone can benefit from whatever actions are taken.
And it seems like, so many of these challenges for ASEAN, they really come back to that need for greater internal cohesion.
Yeah.
Whether it's, tackling climate change or achieving those broader goals that they have. But beyond these, these immediate threats, these immediate issues, what about those long-term opportunities? Like we talked about the digital economy earlier.
Yeah.
What's happening there?
Well, the digital economy, that's an area where ASEAN has just huge potential. I mean, it's one of the fastest growing digital markets in the whole world.
Wow.
More and more people are online. The tech startup scene it's exploding. And this digital transformation, it's affecting everything. E-commerce, fintech, healthcare, education. I mean, you name it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds like a really, really exciting time to be, part of that region. But I mean, like with any kind of technological change, there's got to be some downsides, right? What's ASEAN doing about those?
Oh, you're absolutely right. Along with all those opportunities, there are those challenges that come with it. You've got cybersecurity threats, you've got data privacy concerns, and then there's the whole issue of making sure that everyone has access to this technology, that it's equitable.
Right, making sure that these advancements, they actually benefit everyone, that no one's left behind in this whole digital revolution.
Exactly. And ASEAN, they get it. I mean, they're working on it. They're developing these regional frameworks, these policies to try to guide this whole digital transformation, to make sure that it promotes sustainable growth, inclusive growth.
Right.
And they're also trying to address those potential pitfalls at the same time. It's a work in progress, but I think they're moving in the right direction.
Sounds like it. Okay, so you've got ASEAN navigating all these geopolitical tensions, right? We've got those internal disparities, we've got climate change, we've got this whole digital economy to harness. It's a pretty complex picture, and it's changing all the time.
It is, but as we've talked about, ASEAN, they've got this history of being resilient, of being able to adapt, and their ability to, to deal with these challenges and to make the most of these opportunities. That's going to be absolutely critical for the future of the whole region and for ASEAN's place in the world.
You've given us a lot to think about, but before we wrap things up, I want to go back to something you said earlier about ASEAN's, their desire to have more influence globally. What if, instead of, focusing on joining existing structures like the G20, what if they forge their own path?
Ooh, that's an interesting thought. I mean, it would be a bold move for sure.
Yeah.
But it could also be really powerful. Instead of trying to fit into a system that wasn't really designed for them, ASEAN could create its own model, their own model of regional integration, one that really reflects their own values, their own priorities.
Yeah, that makes sense. A model that really puts sustainability first. Inclusivity, cooperation, both within Southeast Asia and also in how they deal with the rest of the world. That's a pretty inspiring vision.
It is. And maybe by doing that, by forging their own path, maybe ASEAN could inspire other countries, other regions to rethink those traditional ways of doing things. Yeah,
to rethink global governance, global cooperation, the whole system.
Exactly.
So definitely something to think about. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to encourage you, our listener, to keep exploring those sources that we've provided.
Yeah.
There's so much more to learn about ASEAN, about the complexities, about the possibilities, about their future. And, we'd love to hear your thoughts too. What do you think ASEAN should focus on in the coming years? What do you think their role should be in the world? Share your insights, because your perspective is valuable.
Absolutely.
So thanks for joining us on this journey into the heart of ASEAN. And until next time, keep learning, stay curious.